He's about to jump out. Oh!
Go. Kill FM, kill FM. I'm killing Base Mac. I'm going in for Base Mac. Base Mac.
Solzia's slow falling. Alright, Solzia's slow falling. Alright, Base Mac dead. Help me. Over here. Power dead. He got me really low. Yes! Alright, Base Mac dead. Pick up his stuff, Chubb. Are you fighting underwater? You're destroying. Oh, shoot, Tiger. Oh! Yes. You're so stupid! You're all so stupid! Yes. Solzi dead. Power's down all the way down there. Oh, shoot. Yep, there it goes. Base Mac's been hit. Oh, he's done, dude. Yep, Base Mac dead. Welcome back to part 2 of the series. Of course, this video will be continuing the story from the first video. Now, before I get into the video, I'd like to say that most of you guys watching aren't subscribed, so if you guys would do me a favor and subscribe, that would be amazing. Also, join the Discord server in the description. Now that the Great War was over, which is what we named it, peace would be restored in the world. Not much would happen for a little over a week after the war because no one really knew what to do. Finally, stuff would begin to happen on October 26th when power would return from his banning on the realm. Firstly, he would negotiate with Romania to buy the majority of their land, and Romania would surprisingly accept. After that, he would start construction of his new base/capital city near where Istanbul would be. After that, he would start working on getting powerful again, and he would buy enchantment books from countries like the German Empire and the United Kingdom. You see, despite the fact that the United Kingdom and Hungary were just at war, they actually would become good allies over time. After just a few days, Hungary would build up a nice capital city, would have some good gear, and they would also form an alliance called the European Union with Romania. Now on the 29th, the French Empire decided to start being more active. They would buy the rest of France that they didn't already own, and they would also start recruiting more members to join. They would also annex the Baltic Union 2 days later and would recruit all of their members to be in the French Empire. The Baltic Union accepted this because they had good ties with the French and the leader didn't want to own a country anymore. That same day, the German Benelux would be fully annexed by the German Empire, leading the one and only member of the country named Hughes to go homeless. Because of that, he would go to form another country named the Kingdom of Canada, and upon its creation, it would join the European Union. On November 2nd, Hungary would proclaim the Hungarian Empire, and during that same time, a race started to arise named the Arms Race. Basically, members of different countries like the German Empire, Hungarian Empire, and Romania would try to compete with each other to have the most amount of netherite ingots. People would mine netherite for hours and hours on end, gaining stacks upon stacks of netherite ingots. The two leading contestants of the race were me, the leader of the German Empire, and Power, the leader of the Hungarian Empire. And us two would end up being in the spotlight of the race. On November 4th, I had 18 netherite ingots and Power had 28. And only 5 days later, on November 9th, I would have 183 netherite ingots and Power would have 166. The race wasn't violent by any means, and it was honestly just fun to participate in because of the tough competition. There wasn't necessarily any clear winner of the race because it would eventually die off. Anyways, on November 5th, the German Empire and Hungarian Empire would use some of their earnings from the race to buy land in Africa and North America. 2 days later, on November 7th, the Hungarian Empire would buy some land in Africa plus southern Italy from the Portuguese Empire after totally not threatening at all. Now heading over to the French Empire, there seems to be some problems here. You see, after they had been recruiting all of these people that I was talking about earlier, some of them would get into trouble and get themselves killed, mainly by the United Kingdom. Two members in particular were the prime subjects of this, named Fortiels and Base Mac. And yeah, the same Fortiels that was in the USA a while ago, and the same Base Mac I talked about in the last video. What happened to them, you may ask? Well, Fortiels betrayed the USA during the Great War and would hop between a few different countries until ending up into the French Empire. And Base Mac was unbanned from the realm shortly before the Great War began. Anyways, the leader of the French Empire named Dunklin would notice this and would demand the United Kingdom to stop killing Base Mac and Fortiels, or they would go to war with them. The United Kingdom would simply mock the French Empire and call them weak. Tiger, which if you remember is the leader of the UK, would go over to Paris, aka the capital of the French Empire, and would kill Base Mac, Fortiels, and Dunklin. Dunklin took this as a rejection to his offer and declared war on the United Kingdom on November 9th. This war was thought to last maybe a day, if not less, due to the fact that the United Kingdom was much more powerful than the French Empire, but everybody would be wrong. The French Empire would recruit 3 new members named Amos, Mr. Dragon, and Sino to help on their side. They would also attempt to reach out to foreign nations for aid, or even contribution, but most countries denied considering this was a losing war for the French Empire. Lastly, they started to gear up and get potions for fighting. On November 10th, a secret bunker belonging to the French Empire would be discovered below Paris. It would contain tons of patent items and more, making the European Union, which if you don't remember, consists of the countries of Romania, Hungarian Empire, and the Kingdom of Finland, start to debate on joining the war on the United Kingdom side. It will later be found out that all of the hacked items came from Sino, the guy that was recruited earlier to the French Empire. Of course, he would be banned right after this was discovered. On November 11th, Dunklin would be killed in Paris, and after this, he would resign from being the leader of the French Empire. Along with that, more hacked items would be found in the French Empire, leading to the European Union finally making the decision to join the war against the French Empire. Despite the grim situations for France, Bismarck would decide to take the throne of the French Empire, and not surrender to the EU, aka the European Union, and the UK. Unfortunately for him, he would die later that same day and lose his stuff, leading to the regrouping of Paris. The French Empire would finally get a victory the next day on November 12th when they would end up winning a battle with the United Kingdom, resulting in the first French victory in the English Channel. The French would then go on to occupy London, the capital of the UK. Because of this, the UK is weak and they will take a day or so to rise back up, so the French can now focus on their other enemies. So they decided to prepare an attack on the capital of the Hungarian Empire named Istanbul. Meanwhile, the Hungarian Empire had now called in Russia to help them on their side of the war. At around 3 p.m, French forces snuck up on the Russians and Hungarians that were defending Istanbul. And by the way, Power is the only person on his side online other than the Russians to help defend. Anyways, the French forces would reveal themselves and attack, but here's the twist. Russia was actually pretending to help the Hungarian Empire and they would instead start helping the French Empire as soon as they started attacking, leaving Power all alone. Power put up a pretty good fight, although he would ultimately be killed off and lose control of his capital. In the process though, he would almost kill all of the Russians and he would kill a lot of the French forces, but what got him killed was Mr. Dragon getting some good hits on him in the water. If you don't remember, Mr. Dragon was a part of the French Empire. After this defeat, the EU decided that they would sign a peace treaty with the French Empire that stated the following. The French Empire shall give ownership of the Baltic Union to the Hungarian Empire. The French must return all loot that does not belong to them, and the French Empire shall not invade any EU country for 2 weeks unless it's in self-defense. This treaty may sound bad for the French Empire, but it was actually very good for them because they no longer had to focus on the EU and they could now aim all of their forces on the United Kingdom, who is already on the losing side of the war. Since the UK was losing and no longer had the EU, they knew that they had to do something or they would lose. So they would recruit 3 people named Blackman, I Hate Neighbors, and HX. And yes, these were their actual names. Anyways, they got all geared up and started working on getting potions and ender pearls, which were all crucial items for battle. So by November 13th, the UK was ready for battle again. They would first manage to get Fortiels to betray Bismarck and kill him when he least expected it and regain occupation over the UK. Not too long after, they would attack the mainland French Empire and would have an intense battle in Paris where the French would ultimately lose. The French Empire wasn't looking too good again, so they decided to recruit another 2 people named Suburban and LeBron James fan. The 2 would manage to kill Neighbors while he was off guard and chase Tiger off into the wilderness and regain control of the French mainland because of those 2 events. Despite this good start, they would later lose a fight against Black, Neighbors, and Tiger. The UK would not regain control of any French territories because the fight didn't occur in any French land nor UK land. Now the USA has been quietly spectating the conflict in Europe over the past few days, and after some thinking, they decided to join the war on the French Empire's side. Immediately after, a fight would take place in the US, but nobody would win, it would just be inconclusive. Now anyways, Bob Blair, the same guy who carried the USA side during the Great War, would begin to prepare for fighting while nobody else was online. Bob Blair would end up being the only person fighting on the USA side during the entire war. Soon after he would join, he would already begin to have speculations that I Hate Neighbors was an alt account of Power, but these speculations will not be very big right now, but they will be later on. Now on November 14th, nothing much would happen except for Bismarck dying once again to Tiger. Now this would lead to Paris being reoccupied by the UK. On November 15th, Bob Blair would participate in his first fight. He would go against Black in Paris and would fight him for a few minutes until Black would eventually run off back to the UK for shelter. After this, Bob Blair would regain control of Paris. Black and Neighbors arrived as reinforcements. Bob Blair would fight them, but would ultimately retreat all the way down to southern France, but would be flanked by Black in the west. He would actually end up killing Black and would make Neighbors retreat, who had already been chasing him the entire time. Speaking of Neighbors, he would end up finally admitting that he was indeed cede an alt account of power, so the Hungarian Empire is basically in the war now. It's just they were fighting on an alt account. After this, Black, Tiger, and neighbors would group up in the mountains of the Hungarian Empire. They did this because mountains are hard to attack. Anyways, they would prepare by getting totems, ender pearls, gear, potions, and anything used for a fighting advantage. Bobbler didn't want them getting too prepared for fights, so he would get Chub, the leader of Russia, and Basemak to help them push into the Hungarian Empire, then attack them on the mountains. And so they did. They invaded into the Hungarian Empire and would have a stare down with the UK and Hungarian forces once they arrived to their location. Bobbler and his forces would then start to climb the mountains and set up an uncompleted bridge between the two peaks where one of them belonged to them and the other belonged to the UK. As Bobbler was setting up the bridge, the UK forces decided to attack and would ender pearl onto the bridge. There was a big but short fight that would occur on the bridge, which ended up in Basemak dying, Bobbler jumping off and combat logging, and then Chub also dying. Bobbler would eventually get back online and flee to Moscow, the capital of Russia. The UK forces, on the other hand, would move over to Romania and hold a huge celebration for their win. Bobbler would continue to hide out in Moscow during their entire 30-minute celebration while preparing for another fight with the few resources he had. Around 30 minutes after the battle on the bridge, Bobbler would log off the realm for under 2 minutes to go AFK. That's when the UK and Hungarian forces would start to invade Russia. Their plan was to capture Moscow and camp out there and wait for Bobbler to log on and try to kill him. So once he got back on, the UK and Hungarian forces were in Moscow waiting for him. Instead of running like any normal person would do, Bobbler stood his ground, ate a god apple, used some potions, and would play the USA national anthem on a jukebox. He would then charge into this 1v3 almost completely unprepared and would have a very intense fight with the UK forces until he would end up killing Tiger and coming close to killing Black and neighbors, but he would eventually have to run south because his armor is breaking. He would hide out underground for a while and eventually come back to the surface to retake the undefended Moscow. Why was it not defended even after the UK just captured it, you may ask? Well, you see, Bobbler did so much damage to their gear and their supply that they weren't able to support occupying Moscow, so they went back to Romania to restock, allowing for Bobbler to retake Moscow soon after. All of this would conclude the fighting for November 15th. The UK and the Hungarian Empire were not looking so good after the Battle of Moscow because their supply was incredibly weakened and they were practically losing against one man. So they then decided to recruit one more person named Elpsy to help them fight in future battles. They also got HX, the same guy I mentioned earlier, to finally start participating in the war. Anyways, on November 16th, Bobbler would be on standby in Paris in case of an attack by the UK forces, which were on at the time, and by no surprise, the UK with an army of now 5 people were going to try to take the 1v5 against Bobbler in Paris. The UK forces, which consisted of Tiger, Black, Neighbors, HX, and Elpsy, would meet Bobbler in Paris and have a short stare down until Elpsy would rush into battle early and would get dropped immediately. After that, the remaining UK forces would all swarm Bobbler. Bobbler would not run though, but he would stand his ground like before and continue fighting them until he was able to send Black on the run and kill him. Bobbler would then focus on Tiger and break some of his gear, which made him able to kill Tiger. Then HX would get killed in his own cobwebs they tried to trap Bobbler in during the fight. Neighbors, being the last of the UK forces, realized that he would not be able to win the battle alone, so he decided to ender pearl away into the wilderness. The dust had now settled in Paris, leaving Bobbler victorious. Because this fight was a massive loss for the UK, the people fighting decided to overthrow Tiger, who was the current leader of the UK, and replace him with Black. Anyways, Bobbler would go to London after the fight and send this message to the UK. At United Kingdom, this is your chance to surrender. You have nothing else to fight for. You have lost everything and all your men are dead. Your own citizens are now turning against your leader, and American troops are currently standing in your capital city right now, ready to take on any threat no matter how big. And if you do continue to try to fight us, we will fight back with 10 times as much strength. We will fight in the hills, we will fight in the seas and oceans, and in the plains. And we will never surrender. Victory, victory at all costs, whatever the cost may be. Black, who is now the leader of the UK, would respond saying, "I will say we did take a big L today, but we will not surrender at any cost. We will back for our nation, and to win this war, we will not give up, and we will grind harder for our stuff, so don't think that we're going to surrender that easily." Bobbler then responded saying, your fate. There would be a couple of other fights that day, but one that stood out was where Elpsy was blatantly auto-clicking against Bobware, resulting in him getting banned. Lastly, the USA had finally declared war on the Hungarian Empire, meaning they are now officially in the war. Also, Romania is kind of in the war now too. Despite the fact that Power had already admitted that he was neighbors, Power would still try to convince the USA that he was not neighbors, so he gave the account to one of his friends so he could play on it while Power would just play on his main account. I guess to try to make a last-ditch effort on making the USA believe his story. So from now on, when I refer to neighbors, I'm technically referring to a different person. So anyways, on November 17th, Power and Neighbors were, for whatever reason, in Berlin, the capital of the German Empire, while Bobware and a new man that was recruited to the USA side named XRQ were in Paris on standby. As everybody was kind of just minding their own business, Bobware and XRQ decided to surprise attack the UK and the Hungarian forces in Berlin. They went by foot from Paris to Berlin, and once they arrived, Power got scared and ran away using another portal, but Neighbors sat there and didn't move. When Bobware and XRQ rushed into Berlin to fight them, Neighbors pulled out respawn anchors and started using them to fight, which is against the realm rules. Right after that, Power would come back to wherever he ran off to. Despite that, Bobware and XRQ fought Neighbors anyways and would end up having a very intense fight in Berlin, which caused tons of destruction. Black would soon arrive in Berlin to help Neighbors fight. Eventually, Bobware would end up killing Neighbors, but XRQ would die in the process, and lastly, Power and Black would run away using another portal. After this battle, Bobware would inform me, the leader of the German Empire, that Berlin had been blown up, which led to me joining the war on the USA side. Anyways, the UK and the Hungarian Empire quickly recruited another person to help them fight named Mr. Cool Cat, and after doing this, the UK forces and Hungarian forces quickly met up in Romania to prepare for another fight. Anyways, Bobware and XRQ got prepared and went to go attack the Hungarian and UK forces in Romania, but they noticed something weird. The UK and Hungarian forces were eating tons of god apples, which seemed to be coming from an island south of Istanbul. They only went to this island after a fight in an effort to get more supplies as quickly as they could before the next fight happened. So anyways, the next time Bobware and XRQ saw them going there, they followed them. Once the UK and Hungarian forces had gotten to the island, they realized that they were being followed and ran for their life. Bobware and XRQ went to check what was on the island, and they were shocked at what they found. They found tons and tons of shulker boxes filled with ender pearls and shulker boxes that had tons of hacked-in kits that included god apples. Bobware and XRQ started to point fingers at Power because of his history of hacking, but the guy that was really hacking was a person the Hungarian and UK forces just recruited named Mr. Cool Cat. He would end up confessing to hacking the stuff in, leading to him being banned. The rest of the day consisted of some more fights in Romania that all ended in Bobware and XRQ prevailing. Lastly, XRQ would admit that he was an alt account of Tiger, the former leader of the UK. The reason he had betrayed the UK was because he was overthrown earlier. On November 18th, Tiger would now start playing on his main account again since he had admitted that he was XRQ. Also, Romania would now officially join the war on the USA side. Anyways, German, US, and Romanian forces were in Romania when Black and HX surprisingly attacked. They would lose this fight and would come back for another fight and lose once again. Later that day, German and Romanian forces were heading to Berlin through the Nether when they were suddenly jumped by Black and HX. HX would die in his own cobwebs they tried to trap somebody else in, and Black would run to Moscow through the Nether. The German and Romanian forces would follow him through the portal and would have an intense fight in Moscow. HX would arrive with a backup set later in the fight, only to die by Tiger. The German and Romanian forces would then head back to Romania for a while until they were suddenly attacked once again by Black and HX, leading to yet another loss for them. They would try to come back a few times but would fail to do anything significant until one time in particular, HX would arrive by himself, or so everyone thought. Black was actually wearing an invisible skin to disguise himself, while he would place respawn anchors next to German and Romanian forces to try to blow them up, which as we know from before is illegal. Despite this, the German and Romanian forces would continue to fight them until eventually Black would somehow blow himself up and HX would die. Because of this, Black would be banned along with HX because he would also start using respawn anchors. It is strongly believed they did this because they were tired of all the non-stop fighting and this was their way to quit. Since all of the members of the UK were banned, their side of the war had been lost because there was nobody else to fight for them, which finally ended the war after 9 whole days. The victorious side almost couldn't believe that they sold out like that, and they had a huge celebration for their win in the Battle of Romania, which was the largest battle ever on the realm, that lasted for days and consisted of basically every fight I have shown and spoken of that occurred in Romania. Of course, they didn't only win the battle, but they had won the war. It was finally over. After the war, tons of capital cities of countries that were involved were heavily damaged, like Berlin, Istanbul, Paris, London, and Bucharest, which by the way is the capital of Romania. Now, the peace treaty actually did not undergo too much change in the world. The French Empire and the USA would split the UK's land, Tiger would make a new country called the Byzantine Empire in Greece and southern Italy, Romania would get some land from the Hungarian Empire, and the US would take the Newfoundland. I remember quoting after the war is over, "The first part of the war was fought for the defense of your country, but the second part of the war was fought over pure hate." I said this because at first, the battle seemed reasonable and seemed to be planned out, but the second part of the war, either side would just do anything to kill the opposing side, just because they had grown such a hate for each other. This war was easily the largest war ever on the realm, and to this day it still holds that title. This war would be named World War II, which caused the Great War to be renamed to World War I. Similar to World War I, this war would change the way wars were fought on this realm forever. What I mean by that is wars would be fought more cautiously to try to prevent any small war from leading to a massive war just like this one from happening again. Anyways, that just about concludes part 2 of the series. If you guys would like to continue the series, then I'll put the part 3 of the series in the description once it comes out. That's all I have for now, and I'll see you guys later. See ya.